As we continue this bold prediction series, I have a genuine question for those out in Lexington, and I'm not trying to be facetious. But is anything considered not bold for the Wildcats in 2025? You're coming off a 4-8 finish, one conference win in week 5, a brand new quarterback, a slew of new transfers. And there are some people that think this is Mark Stoops last year and nobody's really giving you a shot, including us here at SEC Unfiltered. So what needs to happen for bowl eligibility or even a breakout year that we're so accustomed to seeing out of Kroger Field? I got these 3 bold predictions for you. So let's not waste any time. Welcome on into SEC Unfiltered. It's Cole Thompson here. Kentucky fans, make sure you like the video, hit the ring notification, and of course, subscribe to the channel because we talk about your Wildcats in college football daily. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on social media at SEC Unfiltered, me at Mr. Cole Thompson, and check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. And as always, we're proudly fueled by our friends over at FANDUEL. Go to FANDUEL.com/SECU today and shut us up by hitting the over on Kentucky's win total for 2025. Or throw down a little bit of cash on Zach Calzada to be this year's Heisman Trophy winner. Whatever you want, just go to FanDuel.com/SECU. Join in the madness today, and if you win your first bet, lay down $5. You get $250 in bonus bets to start. So bold predictions. Again, these are out of left field. No questions asked. And so when I'm right, you come back here and say Cole Thompson was the first to tell you. And when I'm wrong, you just remember it was a bold prediction. Wasn't supposed to come true to begin with. Number 1, and this really doesn't feel that bold anymore because we're so accustomed to it, but by the season's end, there will be a player on the Wildcats defense that is considered a first-round pick in next year's draft. I know that seems like I'm taking an out here, but also this is going to be a very underrated defense, like it is most years for Mark Stoops. They have players. They have really solid talent. And what do we know about a Mark Stoops-led team? Every few years, there is somebody that just puts on a highlight tape and becomes the exact reel that defensive coordinators and general managers and people seem to love. And they go, I think that guy can be a Thursday night phone call. That could be somebody that we say is going to be a franchise cornerstone for our team. And usually they end up panning out in some capacity, but we've watched this for a while now, especially in the Stoops era, whether it be Bud Dupree back in, 2016? Well, you had Maxwell Hairston last year. You had Jamin Davis in 2019. You have Josh Hines-Allen. It's just something about the vicinity of what we know when it comes to defensive players at the University of Kentucky. And I don't know who that is right now. My early bet would be McKees Grace, the transfer from South Dakota, because this, to me, feels like a very similar thing to what we saw with Jared Verse leaving UAlbany to go on down to Florida State. There were so many schools that were targeting him because he was one of the best players at the FCS level, put up incredible production for the Great Danes, then went on down to Tallahassee and did the exact same thing for 2 years. That might be McKees Grace. He was the FCS Defensive Player of the Year last season, had a slew of offers all across the country, including multiple SEC schools, and he says he wants to come and play for Mark Stoops, this defense, and be a factor for the Wildcats in 2025. It would make a lot of sense that he has another breakout year, continues his dominance that he had when he was with the Coyotes, and puts on incredible production to where teams are saying, we can't pass on him on a first-round pick. And if it's not him, maybe it's David Augusta, the Washington State transfer at defensive tackle. And if it's not him, maybe it's going to be someone like a DJ Waller. Maybe it will be a Ty Bryant, or maybe it will be one of your defensive backs that we haven't even spent time talking about, like Jonquist Hardaway. Or maybe you could throw in even a guy like Cam Cooley after this season. But I do think that at the end of the day, the thing about Kentucky is their defense always seems to play up to a certain standard. And they have that breakout player. Maxwell Hairston was a very solid contributor in 2023. And then in 2024, he broke onto the field, and people couldn't stop talking about him as an elite shutdown defensive back. That's what Kentucky does. And I don't think it's bold to say that Kentucky is once again going to be in that same conversation. I think that when we look at the talent, just because of what the record says, doesn't mean that they won't have a player. The NFL GMs, scouts, evaluators are salivating over to have the opportunity to draft them on a Thursday night with one of the first 32 picks. Bold prediction number 2, and this one really pains me, but unfortunately, I think this is going to be the case. You're going to have 3 quarterbacks start at least one game in Lexington this year. Zach Calzada is coming on in from Incarnate Word. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be the first to tell you, I have seen Zach Calzada at its finest. 2021. Beats Alabama at Texas A&M, an unranked team, not even projected to be the starting quarterback that year. Balls on out, has the game of his life, and everyone rushed to the field at Kyle Field. The 12th man is rocking and rolling. And that, for me, was the peak of Zach Calzada's career, and everything else has gone downhill since. Couldn't find success out of that game. Never was able to build a consistent rapport when he was at Auburn. Goes to FCS Incarnate Word, puts up decent numbers last season, and now gets one more shot in the SEC to kind of prove himself. I've been told by many people, and I've watched it with my own two eyes. Kid has one speed, 95 miles per hour. It looks awesome on a 50-yard blast down the field. And if he's able to connect with one of the wide receivers, maybe it's True Edwards, maybe it's Kendrick Law, maybe it's Jamori Macklin. Who's to say? I'm not sure. But what I will tell you is, when I look at this team and I say, can he do that on a 5-yard slant pattern, 10-yard out route? What's that going to look like if he's connecting with, I don't know, J.J. Hester at this point? Or what if he's going after a guy like a Troy Stiletto? What is that going to look like? It's going to be pretty painful. And so I don't think that he ends up being the full-time starter this year. At some point, I do think that Mark Stoops, I do think that you will see Bush Hamden turn on over probably to Cutter Boley. Because I do think that last season he showed you a little bit of promise at times. So he's going to get an opportunity. And then if that doesn't work out, I do think that you're going to turn eventually to either a Bo Allen, a Brennan Ward, maybe go to a Stone Saunders. You got to figure out what your long-term plan is at the quarterback position, because the transfer portal hasn't been kind to you since the first moment of the Will Levis era. You went from Will Levis, thought that he was going to be a difference maker, number 1 overall pick, still had a decent career in year 2. But then you remember, you went on over to Devin Leary. That didn't pan on out. Then you went on over to Brock Vandagriff. That didn't pan on out. Now you go into another quarterback that has former SEC experience and is a veteran that I just don't see the value in what he has provided over his last several stops that is going to elevate this team. It's not going to reach that level of what we saw a few seasons ago where 9-3 was possible. And in fact, it was almost a common occurrence that every 3 years we would go and watch Kentucky rattle off a couple of upset wins and be in the running for a dark horse conversation as a New Year's Six bowl team. Never a college football playoff team, but at the time, New Year's Six was actually pretty dang good. I don't think you're going to see that. I don't know if Cutter Boley's the answer. I don't know if you have the answer currently on the roster. I don't know if it's because of you're going about recruiting wrong. But I think at some point you are going to see there be a separation at the quarterback spot. Calzada will start in week 1. No doubt about it. Toledo rolls to town. How does that game pan out will determine the next several starts and when we see the next guy. And ultimately, when you get to conference play, I think that you are going to make a switch. Don't know when, don't know which game, don't know how many times. But my bold prediction is there will be 3 different passers playing underneath center in 2025 for the Wildcats. And bold prediction number 3, the Mark Stoops era comes to an end. It does. And I understand that there's going to be a lot of people that talk about, well, what about the buyout? What are we going to do with his massive contract that he signed? It's one of the most team-friendly deals in college football for a coach perspective, because all you got to do is meet certain standards. And if you reach that goal, okay, you're absolutely going to get paid. I mean, Mark Stoops' contract is honestly one that I would never want to go ahead and walk away from. But remember this. They were saving money out in Lexington to go buy out one Mr. John Calipari. And when Calipari said, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to go to Fayetteville, restart my career, hopefully revitalize a program that wants to get back to this level of dominance, they had money left over. And so they have money that is saved on up for a coaching buyout. It's not going to happen on the baseball field with Damian Jones. It's not going to happen with Mark Pope. So the next name up is going to be Mark Stoops. And we know what the standard is at Kentucky. He has changed the way that we view the program. I think that at the same time, he's always going to be remembered as one of the pioneers of turning Kentucky into at least a relevant and predominant football school, one to where 4-star recruits and transfer portal players were saying, I could call Kroger Field home for a season or 2. I like this place. I think that this could be a good starting step for me or a closing step for me en route to making it to the NFL. He did that. Took a program that was an absolute joke for years and went from 2-10 to back-to-back 5-7 finished seasons, to bowl eligibility, to a 10-win season, to another 10-win season, and then once again, not missing a bowl game for 9+ years. That's something that you can be proud of. He's the all-time winningest coach in blue and white history. He's somebody that you can say has turned the program forwards better. But ultimately, sometimes chapters have to end. It had to end for Gus Malzahn at Auburn, because if he just wasn't the right fit anymore, it had to end at some point for Nick Saban. It ended on his own terms, but eventually it was going to lead to that path. It has to end for everybody. The game eventually passes you by to where you're saying, what we're doing isn't working out. Les Miles won a championship out in LSU, and they said, what you're doing is not working out. It's kind of Mark Stoops. That's where you're at. And I think that if you look at the season, even if you have solid defensive play, even if you have a breakout running back performance, I don't know who that's going to be. Maybe it will be Dante Dowell. Maybe it will be Jason Patterson. If you have a wide receiver that steps on up, I look at the roster and I say to myself, there's missing elements across the board. The offensive line, I have a lot of questions about. This is not the BBW of old with that big blue wall that was dominant. Defensively, I still have my questions. So I think ultimately when you look at what the future is of Wildcat football, Kentucky wants to start over. They need a fresh start. They need that jolt. They need that spark, that intensity. And sometimes you get that because if you're in a draw relationship and you need to spice some things up, sometimes that leads to divorce. Sometimes that leads to separation. And that's kind of where I think we're at with Mark Stoops. He's forever going to be remembered for what he has done for the program out in Kentucky. And he's forever going to be remembered for how he's been able to turn a team into a consistent, every 3 years, 10-win conference competitor. That we can do. We're not going to take that away from him. But in the grand scheme of things, the way that Kentucky is going, recruiting, on-field results, inconsistent play, inability to find your quarterback. All of those things, I think, are hindering Stoops to where we are going to see a change in the right direction. And maybe this is the move that will bring John Summerall home. And if it is, that'd be great. But if not, Kentucky will find its next successor that is going to bring a new tradition and hopefully the same winnable sustainability that we saw for quite some time in the Stoops era to Kroger Field on Saturday afternoons. But let me know in the comment section what I got wrong. I'm sure that I pissed off a lot of people for Kentucky, but like, review, hit subscribe. Make sure you're following us on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson. Check out all of our other videos. Make sure that also you go check out our work at SECUnfiltered.com. And to keep up to date with everything that we're doing, make sure you're following us on at SECUnfiltered. Until next time, folks, I am Cole Thompson. Big Blue Nation, I promise you, it's always darkest before the dawn. Peace.